With two big trades in Buffalo and New York happening this week, we will dive into the dynasty outlook of both Amari Cooper and Davante Adams. Along with that, we will discuss the never-ending black hole of the tight end landscape and what to do with the Panthers' offensive weapons. All this and more tonight here on the Rod Pod. It is time to pull up a chair and talk some dynasty football. I am Jameson Hutchison. JJ Wenner, the one who normally does this and does it a lot better than me, is on assignment this week. But as always, I got Joseph Harlow with us. Joe, how are we doing?
Good. Happy to be back. I missed you guys last week.
Yes, you were on assignment last week,
I
enjoying
was.
Omaha, I heard. How was it?
Yes. It was a good time. Got to go to the zoo, pumpkin patch, all of kiddo's favorite stuff for his birthday. It's a good time.
There you go. So while you were gone, we had two big trades. We had Amari Cooper going to the Bills. We have Davante Adams going to the Jets, which seemed like inevitable a year and a half ago, and we finally got it midway through the season. But we got that. We're going to talk Panthers offensive weapons, what to do with them in Dynasty. We're going to go over the tight end landscape. Seems like we are getting some people back. Seems like we got some people going away. We'll get into that. And then we'll talk about the Thursday night football game. So before we do that, we've got a sponsor. Joe will kick us off with one of our sponsors here.
Yep. It says start, but we're a third of the way through the season. So continue your season correctly with IDP Plus. Visit idpplus.com. And for a limited time, get 20% off any subscription with the promo code PROPS. That is PROPS. Get access to our tools, data, and IDP articles, including one of my articles that I do every week, minus the last two, which is an IDP Start Sit article. Have to get the shameless plug in there. Don't miss out on our subscriber Discord as well, where your subscription gets you access to your subscription will get you access to our entire suite of tools. They are pretty sweet. Go to IDP Plus and start your march to fantasy glory today.
There we go. So we're going to just kick it off. Which one do you want to start with first? You want to talk about Davante Adams? You want to talk about Amari Cooper? You have preference?
Let's go with the more surprising one in Amari Cooper.
That sounds good to me. So Amari Cooper finally gets out of the hellhole that is Cleveland, ends up with Buffalo, which kind of interesting. Buffalo seems like it's going to be a pretty deep playoff team. Offense needs a lot of help. Dalton Kincaid hasn't gotten there. The Russian roulette of wide receivers has been kind of abysmal. Keon Coleman been playing out of position. So Amari Cooper, I guess short-term and long-term, where do you feel about the trade for Amari Cooper going to Buffalo?
I think it makes a lot of sense NFL-wise. I know Cooper's been has been getting an awesome target share, I should say. Has struggled a lot with it. I know I've been listening to the Yahoo podcast, and Matt Harmon's mentioned multiple times that over 52% of his air yards have been uncatchable. That's out of almost 700 air yards through 6 games. So that's awful. Deshaun Watson freaking sucks. But with Josh Allen, I don't think he'll end up getting a similar target share. Looking at it, I just lost him on my team. He has 53 targets so far through 6 games. I don't think he'll keep up that 9 target a game pace, but I think he's going to have significantly better targets. I think he could still, in his next 6 games, he could still have 24 catches, though maybe on 38 targets. I think they're going to be higher leverage. I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1 the rest of the season, but I could see him being in that, 18 to 22 range rest of the season. I think he's the big boy receiver there. He can run those big boy routes. He's a true X receiver and can play some flanker as well, depending on what they think Keon Coleman's better at. But I think the receiving core looks pretty good now. Khalil Shakir is a really good too, I think. Coleman is what he is. He's a young player. Curtis Samuel, I know he's one of JJ's favorites. I don't really know what's up with him. And then Dalton Kincaid, who some people on this podcast hyped up a lot. Whoops. But we'll get into more of Kincaid later, I suppose. But yeah, I don't see him getting 9 targets a game, but I think he can be top 20-ish, give or take, receiver. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually really in on Amari Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is the second time he's been traded in season. So the end of the Cowboys run was a little goofy. Had the playoff game where everybody blamed him for not showing up when it mattered the most, but ends up going to Cleveland. The end last year with Joe Flacco, he goes on like a scorched earth run,
Oh my lord.
just like destroying everybody. And then of course, Cleveland, offensive line sucks, quarterback's even worse. So I don't blame him. I know a lot of the metrics are bad. He's an older wide receiver, so that kind of comes into play. But him going into
Mhm.
Buffalo, I know that they are still going to be very run heavy. The offensive line has been really good, just mauling the hell out of people, and I think that will kind of lean into how they go into the postseason. Let's say if they
Yep.
do, which as long as they stay healthy. The thing that they have missed the last couple of years, they've just been beaten up on the offensive line the last couple playoff games. So I know they still want to run the ball. I just found out that Ray Davis, pretty good prospect coming out of Kentucky this past week, and I think he'll get some run with uh, James Cook. But as far as Amari Cooper goes, I think he'll be good for Buffalo. The last thing that Josh Allen wants to do is be throwing game-ending touchdown scores to Matt Collins, or trying to at least. That's just not
Yeah.
a match made in heaven. So I think he's going to be good for that part, kind of stretch the field a little bit. But I also hope that he opens up some of these wide receivers who are basically Khalil Shakir is fine underneath. I think a lot of people got a little more excited, a little bit better than what he is pretty much thought of. Curtis Samuel hasn't really done much. Keon Coleman, I hope, gets moved more to his natural position. I feel like he's played a lot of out of position. He's had like a couple moments, but he hasn't been great, and I feel like people are ready to call him a bust. I'm not. I think Amari Cooper will actually help him. And then Dalton Kincaid, man, I feel like it's been close. I feel like it's
Yeah.
been close, especially with tight ends being as bad as it's been. But I really like the Amari Cooper trade to Buffalo. I think it helps them become an actual contender because, I mean, nobody's been afraid of this Bills wide receiving core so far this year. So it works out really well. And then on the other side, in New York, Davante Adams ends up going to the Jets, which just seems like it's been inevitable for a very long time. Uh, how do you feel about this? Do you think it's been too late for Davante Adams kind of fix things up for the Jets, or how do you feel about them short term and long term for him?
It makes sense. I don't think a team will ever be worse with Davante Adams. Like, it's definitely going to help their offense, but it's not like that's what the biggest problem with the Jets was. I think it's going to be good for Garrett Wilson long term for his career outlook to have another receiver. Garrett Wilson's kind of playing a little out of position. Aaron Rodgers kind of forces a style of play that just a very exact style of play that doesn't fit Garrett Wilson. He's not going to be at your specific landmarks. If you're supposed to run around at 7 yards, he's not really going to do that all the time. He's a lot more freelancing, which just isn't what Rodgers is. Well, I think Adams will be able to help him kind of get there. I know that was my biggest concern with Wilson as a prospect and with all the hype he's gotten, but I'm not super moved. I don't think Garrett Wilson is going to be a wide receiver one rest of the season. I don't think Davante Adams is a wide receiver one rest of the season. But I think they're both going to be solid. I think maybe they end in the 10 to 16 range, both of them. They're not going to return on that first round investment you gave in Garrett Wilson, or they're probably, I think they're still going to be good players, and it doesn't bother me at all for Breece Hall. I just think I think it's going to open a lot more vertical shots for Garrett Wilson, and Adams, I think, is going to be a PPR monster. Maybe not monster.
Yeah, it's weird because even though it's nice to have Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson on the same team, I still don't really believe it though. I know Aaron Rodgers has looked okay, but this offensive line is bad, and
It is.
that is the problem that I've had. Everybody's getting really excited about it. Aaron Rodgers hasn't thrown for 300 yards in forever, and I know
he got close the other night.
He got close. Breece Hall ended up having the most work he's had all season.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looking like that, RB 2-3 that everybody took him this offseason. So you have Garrett Wilson, you have Davante Adams, you have Breece Hall, you have a kind of immobile quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, and then everybody thinks that this offense is going to go scorched earth behind this offensive line that's not very good. I worry about that. I worry about this team long term too, especially say if Aaron Rodgers is done after this season, or if even next season.
Yeah.
I think this team is in like real big trouble long term. I think they've sold a lot of resources to try to win now. If they make it to the playoffs, which I think there's a chance in the AFC, obviously, I'm very worried that they get just destroyed by any team with a defensive line. So you talk about Kansas City Chiefs. Houston Texans would be another one. Just anybody who's got a guy on the defensive line who kind of wreck a game. I think they could do it with Aaron Rodgers. So I'm worried about it. I'm more excited about the Amari Cooper. I think Davante Adams obviously more talented than Amari Cooper, but as far as fantasy, I'm more excited about Amari Cooper going to Buffalo with Josh Allen, who's a playmaker. Probably more of a need on offense than Davante Adams was on Green Bay, and he doesn't have the target competition like Davante Adams has with Garrett Wilson. So obviously the touchdowns might go Davante Adams' way if he locks onto, or if Aaron Rodgers locks onto him like he did when he was in Green Bay. They get on like the 1 yard line, and instead of running it with Aaron Jones, they just run like the bubble screen to Davante Adams. But I just more excited about Amari Cooper overall than Davante Adams, and I feel like that's a little bit different than what other people have it.
Yeah, I agree there. I don't think that's crazy at all. I still think I'd rank Adams higher rest of the season, but I think also if you compare, I think Cooper from where he was in Cleveland is significantly improved, whereas Adams I don't think is really much different. I don't see him much differently than he was with the Raiders ranking wise, but I think they're close to each other now. Yeah, the Jets. I don't see a way that the staff continues. And a lot of it is just the offense is going to be so bland that I don't think there's really much that's going to happen. Olu Fashanu struggled a lot, but he's also playing out of position. He was a left tackle throughout his high school and collegiate careers and now is playing right tackle at the highest level. And Tyron Smith looks like he's about 150. So,
right.
Yeah, it's
just kind of tough.
Yeah. So, how do you feel about, I guess, just a quick offshoot, the rest of the targets? Like, are you worried about Breece Hall with Adams coming in, or think he's still top 5 running back rest of the season or something?
With his workload this past week, I'm feeling pretty comfortable about Breece Hall. Braylon Allen didn't have much work this past week, and that was kind of the worry. We worry about the other guy in Bijan Robinson, who Tyler Algier is like totally eating into a 50-50 time split with him. That's been kind of goofy there. But as far as the Breece Hall stuff goes, it just I think he's going to be okay. And then as far as Davante Adams and Garrett Wilson, I think they'll just kind of be 1 week go one way, another week go in the other, and that's been kind of I'm not too worried about them. I just think they end up as high end wide receiver 2s.
Have them as high end wide receiver 2s, you said? Sorry, my internet's being a little wonky right now.
Nope, you're all good. So I don't think it eats into too much of it.
I agree. And with the Bills, yeah, I never was. I don't think any of the receivers ever had like a wide receiver 1 or even 2 upside. Shakir is still the 2, I think, and we'll get into Dalton Kincaid in a little bit.
Yep. So we'll move on to the next topic, but before that, if you want to do the thing that we have going on here for IDP Plus as well.
Yes. So, Jameson, do you have busy life? Do you eat a lot of fast food?
I do, unfortunately.
I struggle with that as well, especially this past week while on the road a lot. But how about, are you getting tired and looking for a change of pace with your meals?
I could use something new in my life.
IDPplus.com/HelloFresh. You can get your first delivery free. You can pick from an exciting range of recipes and get fresh ingredients delivered directly to you. And I have to say, I used HelloFresh a lot as my wife and I were starting our adult lives. So a lot of times it was hard to meal plan and to actually pick what you want to eat. And HelloFresh gives you a lot of options, gives you step-by-step directions so you can actually see and learn how to cook some things. I use a lot of meals from them to this day.
I think we lost you there for a minute.
It's not as it can be a lot less expensive than a trip to the grocery store. Did I cut out there?
Yep, you're all good now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. My
Got goofy
computer's
there
still
for a
on
second.
vacation, apparently.
So we're all good. I caught the end of it, but we are all good to go.
Cool.
So
next up, I guess we should mention Rashid Shaheed going on IR as of today, out for the season.
kind of tough, especially it's frustrating because the first 2 weeks I thought the Saints offense looked pretty good. Clint Kubiak was getting some rub, maybe the next great head coaching hire, but it just this is a tough run out. Spencer Rattler, who we'll get into here in a little bit. Not going from Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed to Bub Means is, I mean, no disrespect to my man Bub, but it just times are tough in New Orleans right now.
I was a fan of Bub as a prospect, but kind of as like a day 3 potential guy, not as a starting receiver early on in his career. He showed some promise. He had a touchdown, but we'll see how it goes.
Still just tough. Offensive line is really banged up. No, the Broncos probably aren't the most ferocious, especially with Patrick Surtain out. The defense has been pretty good this year, but just overall, this game environment for the Saints tonight, probably not the best. Like I said, we'll get into here in a few minutes, but it's just feel bad for Spencer Rattler. He gets an opportunity to kind of show what he's got. One of the more exciting later round draft picks in quite some time, and it'd been really cool if Olave and Shaheed was here. But Shaheed was having a great year too. I mean, everybody thought of him as just a deep threat. And I thought he was more than that. He was kind of starting to show it, but wheels starting to fall off, and just times are tough, like I said.
Hey, the guy who took him in the Scott Fish Bowl in the first round was looking pretty darn good after the first few weeks. But, oh well. So next, who do you want to talk about?
We'll get into the tight ends here.
Tight ends now?
Yeah, we could do that. So
alrighty, let's do it. Okay, so what the hell are we doing with the tight ends? Frankly, Brock Bowers, I think, clear Dynasty tight end 1. Any issues there?
No, and his playoff matchup here at the end is pretty good too. So, I mean, quarterback sucks, has no weapons around him, but I mean, with tight end right now, Brock Bowers seems like the kind of going to be really good for a really long time.
I think he's already in the argument for best on-field tight end in the league. He's 21, 22, so I think he's a clear one, tier alone. Then I think there's typically the 3 names. I know, looking at Fantasy Pros, the Dynasty Nerds, and Keep Trade Cut, which are just bigger resources. The next 3 names are Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, and Dalton Kincaid. All 3 of them have them in that order. Is that how you would rank them next?
I would have McBride as 2.
I would too.
Laporta has not been very good this year. I just kind of worried about him overall. Jameson Williams being good is not good for Sam Laporta. I know he had a touchdown this past week, but
only target.
I was going to say his targets are down, so not really as interested in him. That was a short-term thing. And then Dalton Kincaid, he's not been that good as much as I liked him this offseason. Just really hasn't been that good, so I worry about that. It's just it's ugly. I don't think that's concrete, but Trey McBride would be 2 for me.
I agree. That's the only other one I feel good about placing. Kincaid, I know he's tight end 10 right now. Last 3 weeks have looked a little better overall with 20 targets total, but then Amari Cooper's coming in. I still think you could probably have to put him at 4 in these rankings, unless you're, depending on how heavily you're weighting a win now piece like a Travis Kelce, now as he's really the only target, or Evan Ingram. But I think TJ Hawkinson has something to say about that potentially. But yeah, I think Laporta and Kincaid would still, and Pitts probably 3 to 5 for me, but I don't feel great about any of them.
If it depends on how long your dynasty outlook is, let's say 2 years, I think George Kittle should be up there. I mean, George Kittle.
Oh yeah, you're right.
It's just I would rather have George Kittle than Dalton Kincaid right now. I don't think that's controversial, but if you look at the rankings, it is. If you're worried about his age, but I mean, George Kittle's been really good so far this year, and Mark Andrews he's kind of fallen off a cliff. TJ Hawkinson's a really interesting guy if he comes back healthy like he was, because this last time we saw him with Kirk Cousins, I mean, he was destroying defenses.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he could be pretty good still. So I think the only other names I'd really Evan Ingram. I don't know how to feel there. Yeah,
I don't. It's I was very upset with him because he kind of destroyed the Brian Thomas stuff this past week. I feel like he destroyed, not that the Jaguars offense had any chemistry, but just he kind of threw a wrench into it. One guy who's really interesting on this list, David Njoku, ends up being
that's
basically
yeah.
the number one target. Was really good last year with Flacco. If they put in Jameis and he ends up being basically the wide receiver one on this team as at tight end, um, I feel better about Njoku than I do
Yeah.
Kincaid, Mark Andrews. I think he's up there with Pitts, Hawkinson, and Kittle, like right underneath there. I like Njoku a lot, and I think he's shown a lot more than Dalton Kincaid. I'll
I
put
agree.
it that much. So
I agree. I like Njoku a lot. It's just that quarterback.
no
And
bueno.
doesn't seem like ownership's going to let him come out anytime soon. I think if Kevin Stefanski really had his way, that Jameis would have been starting already, but I don't think that's going to be allowed to happen. Then I think the other name we have, Jake Ferguson, is another name to bring up, but who I think is just he's solid.
I'm higher on Jake Ferguson the most. He ends up
Yeah.
basically the wide receiver two for the Cowboys.
Mhm.
Now that CeeDee Lamb's there, he gets all the attention. Jake
Yeah.
Ferguson ends up the number one pass catcher behind him. So
Mhm.
I like him
agree.
a lot.
And I think having Jalen Tolbert break out a little bit as at least a competent target is good for Ferguson. It kind of takes eyes away from the defense a bit. Yeah, I think Ferguson and Njoku, I think, are similarly ranked to me in the Kittle, Hawkinson range. Then I think it depends on your team build, how you'd rank them versus those other three younger guys. Other name we'll have to bring up is Tucker Kraft. Like, he's been really freaking good.
I was really wrong on him this offseason. I took a lot of Luke Musgrave. The injury to Tucker Kraft I was worried about. It just seems like a bad run up, but Tucker Kraft's been good. I just worry about have so many mouths to feed in Green Bay. Like, you can't really rely on him, I wouldn't think, every single week. I mean, I guess you can say the same thing about George Kittle, even though I think George Kittle is much better. But he's definitely been interesting and a guy I feel like I totally whiffed on this offseason.
Yeah, I agree. I know I was super in on Luke Musgrave as a prospect and bled that over into the season. And yeah, Kraft's just been really good. He's a super versatile player, really good at everything. And he is the dump off guy now. He's the safety valve with whatever's going on with the receiver room.
Right.
I think where would you put him dynasty wise? Like, is he a top 10 tight end for you right now? I think a lot of it depends on build probably, but
if it was, I mean, he'd be at the very end. The only other guys on the top of my head, Dalton Schultz was kind of in that range for a little bit.
Okay.
Cole Kmet. These are guys I don't love, but I just feel like they're in the same
Mhm.
kind of stratosphere. I like Tucker Kraft more than him, and I like Jordan Love a lot too. I think your tight end tied to their quarterback for a long time sets up really nice too.
I agree.
But I do not feel comfortable putting him anywhere besides the very end of. I think he can sneak into the top 10, but I don't see much more than that. Only guy we didn't talk about is Mark Andrews. Are you trying to sell him completely, or are you thinking about holding on?
I don't know. Honestly, like, I really don't know. I don't have many shares of him. Just I've never liked him as an on-field player. But so just one of those things where I don't like watching him, so I never had him. But I feel like at this point he's a hold. Lamar's playing out of his mind. He seems to be getting a little healthier. Like, I still don't think that Rashad Bateman's a better player than he is, assuming Andrews is somewhat healthy.
Right.
So I think he's probably still the 2A, 2B with Isaiah Likely, depending on the week. So I'm still holding him, but I don't think he's a top 6 tight end play at all.
No, his
back end tight end one maybe.
His route participation and then just his targets, even though he got the touchdown, people kind of got excited. It's still not there. I think it's still very worrisome. If I can get out of Mark Andrews, I would right now, personally.
Yeah. I just don't think you are getting enough to actually make it worth it, because he does still have the massive upside, but I just don't. One of those things, is it really worth it to get like the 20th pick in your rookie draft for him? Like,
right. It's just it's tough, and
mhm.
I thought tight end this year was going to be a lot better, just like everybody else did, and it seems like we are back to the same old, same old.
In half PPR scoring, there are 7 tight ends scoring 8 or more points a game, and one of those is Isaiah Likely, who had half of his points come in one game. Dallas Goedert, who we haven't mentioned, also had, I think, half of his points in one game. Cole Kmet, same thing. Like, it's really been George Kittle, Brock Bowers, and Trey McBride, really, and Ferguson, really the only ones who've kind of been somewhat consistent.
Yeah. The one guy we didn't really talk about, Travis Kelce, seems like he might end up having a run just because the last of the people left in Kansas City. So he's not a guy. I don't think I have any Travis Kelce, but I just it gets kind of tough because he's like probably his last year. I mean, you would think in an ideal world that you can get out from that, but at the same time, he might be able to help you win. So it kind of ends up being in a kind of tough spot there.
Even as a contender, what would you really give up for Kelce at this point? Like, would you give a second rounder for him?
If I had some extras, yes. But if I was somebody who was holding on to draft capital, which I kind of like to because I like having a lot of dart throws.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't unless I thought that I can contend and he was available. But other than that, I probably wouldn't even go that far with it, honestly.
Yeah. So, what a gross position still.
It's tough. Another thing, not so pretty gross as well. Panthers offense. It's got some couple guys I want to talk about real quick. Yeah, exactly. Keep pounding. Deontay Johnson ends up a top 12 wide receiver ever since Andy Dalton has walked into the fold. But talk about some trade speculation, some worry that Bryce Young might come back, and then Chuba Hubbard, who has been also really good. Offensive line has some injuries. It's getting worse.
Mm-hmm.
He has Jonathan Brooks, the rookie, starting to practice again. A lot of people were in on him. How do you feel about them dynasty-wise so far? I'm very worried, just personally, before I guess I'll give my spiel. I'm very worried that the bottom will fall out on both of these guys.
Yeah.
And I'm sure other people realize that too, but like, do you just hold on with the sinking ship even though they're doing really well and it looks really pretty right now, or are you trying to, get out from underneath of it?
I think Chuba Hubbard's one of those guys that's like we've talked about. I don't think you can get enough to be worth it because Jonathan Brooks is coming back. And a little aside, love the running back discourse you guys had last week. And with how kind of yucky it is now, honestly, Jonathan Brooks is probably in my top 10 running backs dynasty-wise, despite not playing a snap. I think that's just how the position is right now. But I mean, Hubbard, I don't think he's going to take the bell cow role this year. At least not. He's not going to have it his first game back, whether that's this week, next week, the week after. I think Hubbard is still going to be usable at worst. I think it's going to be enough where he should be played, but is he going to get touchdowns? Or I really think, I know, and like my home league, I have Hubbard and Brooks with the hope that Hubbard was just going to get volume and be bad, and then Brooks would totally take over. I don't think that's what it's going to be. So I think both are kind of going to sink your roster for a redraft league. But again, Hubbard, I don't think you're going to get anything really. If you can get a second rounder for Hubbard, I'm taking that right now.
Yep.
I don't think he's good enough to get a bell cow role somewhere else. So
he's been
where are you at, Hubbard?
He's been really good, and I think the run out for this Jonathan Brooks stuff has been really bad as far as you're playing redraft. You were holding on to him in the hopes that Chuba Hubbard sucked, and then Jonathan Brooks got to be eased in and kind of win you a league.
Yeah.
I don't think it's worked out that way. Chuba Hubbard's been really good. He's been a top 12 running back. Miles Sanders, obviously no dice in there. He hasn't been any talking point. And then, so if you can get a second, I think that'd be more than happy because maybe he ends up elsewhere and kind of does this. But as far as like long-term after this year, I worry about Chuba Hubbard. He might end up in like a split backfield somewhere else, or if he ends up, I brought it up earlier on accident. Jonathan Stewart, former Carolina Panther, and D'Angelo Williams. If that's what ends up being Chuba Hubbard and Jonathan Brooks, and kind of so be it. But
That'd
it's
be cool.
it's probably a hold. If you can get something out of him, I probably would. And then Deontay Johnson. I love Deontay Johnson, but he's a 30-year-old wide receiver. I'm very worried that Bryce Young comes back and totally plummets what he's doing right now. And he's a top 12 wide receiver, and somebody can kind of get excited about it. But if Carolina keeps losing, they still want to see Bryce Young one more time before they totally cut bait with it. I think that kind of craters a lot of his value.
Yeah, and I think it would make sense for the Panthers to do that, give him a couple weeks, and then put him back in just to see if maybe being on the bench solved something. I mean, why the heck not, frankly? But yeah,
you also have to worry about. I was going to say, just real quick, you have to worry about the quarterback next year because it's not going to be Bryce Young, probably not going to be Andy Dalton either. So that's another part of it.
And I know we talked about it the first few weeks of in-season show, but there aren't a huge amount of I don't think there are any day one starting prospects in this class. I really like Jalen Milroe, Cam Ward. I think they've got a lot of spunk to them, if nothing else. Garrett Nussmeier, Quinn Ewers, then Shadur Sanders, Carson Beck. They all, I think, can be starters in this league. I don't think any of them can be day one. Maybe Sanders, but
yeah. And it's not like the environment in Carolina is great anyways for these guys to succeed. But that's a really good point. A lot of people have talked about this offseason, this upcoming draft class, as far as especially quarterbacks, but as far as actual first rounders, probably not a whole lot of them. Obviously, there's going to be 32 first round picks, but as far as first round talent players, kind of iffy. It's more on the defensive side, so it's just tough. I've kind of tried to play around with some Deontay Johnson stuff because I have a decent amount of them. Doesn't seem like a lot of people are biting, but if I could get out from both of these guys, I'm trying to maneuver, but I kind of play Dynasty with the mindset of trying to, kind of know when to hold them and know when to fold them. And I think it's time to fold them, even though they're doing really well, but I just don't see the ceiling get much higher than this.
Yeah, I think the best hope for Deontay is a move, frankly. Again, for NFL wise, the Panthers look better with Andy Dalton, but for their team, for the health of their roster, it makes sense to go back to Bryce Young sooner rather than later. Dalton's been fine, but I think Dave Canales, if they stick with him a couple more weeks, he's proven that he cares about the team and is not just throwing them to the wolves for shits and giggles and for clout or whatever. But they need to go back to Bryce Young at some point,
just to see if they have anything at all, if it sitting fixed anything. But I just it's tough in Carolina. So just real quick, we got a game tonight. Not pretty either. Thursday night game, we got the Broncos at the Saints. Sean Payton going to New Orleans for the first time since leaving, I believe. Dennis Allen was defensive coordinator for Denver back in the day too, so they kind of go head to head. Broncos favored by 2.5 points. Spencer Rattler is not playing with any of his teammates; they're all hurt. Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Taysom Hill, a couple guys on the offensive line. Defense, it's tough. Broncos favored, right? Patrick Surtain's out for the Broncos, but Broncos defense has been really good, especially on the ground, but through the air too. The trio in the backfield and the back end has been really good. So, how do you feel about this game overall? Me personally, I would say if you have a family and you don't see them a whole lot, you could probably take the night off. I don't think there's much fantasy goodness going on. If you just want to, tell your peeps you love them, go hang out with them instead. Don't think it's the worst night for it. But how do you feel about this game?
So I will say in New Orleans right now is the American Dental Association's big monthly convention. My mother-in-law is there, who is the VP of the Wyoming branch. She was actually on the flight that a lot of Broncos reporters and such were on. It was announced as a Bronco flight this morning. So I'd be significantly more interested in attending that convention right now than watching this game. And that's putting out, aside from the fact that I am in the dental industry, I am not going to watch this game. The only reason I would watch would be to see how Spencer Rattler does in his second game as a pro. But again, then at the same time, is it really worth it? Because he doesn't have any of his targets. The Broncos defense is weird and missing their best player. I'll watch the film. I'll watch Spencer Rattler snaps. Bo Nix isn't good. Then yeah, like
it's kind of a shame because Spencer Rattler coming out of college was really interesting to me. I know he went to the 5th round, but I would have loved to see him. Chris Olave gets hurt like one of the first plays last week. Play with Shaheed. The game got a little wild. First half was really good for Rattler, I thought. Todd Bowles kind of got to him the second half. But before we go, we got some props. Spencer Rattler over 184.5 passing yards. Do you think him and Bub Means can get it done?
Patrick Tan's not there. I'm going to go with my guy. I'll say over here. What about you?
I'll go over as well. I just a lot of Bub Means, maybe some Juwan Johnson, and then some dump offs to Alvin Kamara. So, on the other side, Bo Nix has been scrambling a lot. He's quietly gotten there in fantasy. I think he's like QB 13. It is not pretty. That's like the close your eyes and just watch the box score at the end. But over 26.5 rushing yards.
Double check and see how has he done in this prop previously this season. Should have had that ready beforehand. I'll defer to you for a second while I look something up real quick.
I think he's going to go over. Okay. He's been doing this, seems like quietly throughout the season. He's a little more athletic than a lot of people think of him, and I think he's been over. I think last week he was over 30. So I'm going to go over 26.5 rushing yards for Bo Nix, even though Saints defense probably won't get to him a whole lot, but at the same time, he's been running a lot, and outside of Cortland Sutton, I don't know who else on the Broncos offense that anybody's scared of.
Yeah, he's hit the over on this 3 times and then was 1 yard, then was at 25 yards another time. So I'm going to go over as well. He's a better runner than he is a passer at this point. And a lot of that is I don't think he was ever a great prospect. Also, I don't think Sean Payton's done him any favors as a play caller and building team. But
no, and the wide receivers or lack thereof is pretty tough too. A lot of people like Cortland Sutton. He hasn't really done a lot. Tim Patrick is gone. That was like a guy who I kind of liked. And then rest of it, Troy Franklin, a bunch of really small guys. It just it's ugly there. And then last prop for the night, the only other guy on offense besides Spencer Rattler, Alvin Kamara, over 67.5 rushing yards going up against the Broncos run defense that's been pretty good this year.
I'm actually going to go the under here. If it was receiving yards, I would take the over, even at this number. But I think it's just going to be a lot of dump offs. I think the Broncos are really going to sell out to stop the run.
So I'm going to go under here as well. It just offensive line injuries have been really bad for the Saints. Alvin Kamara, I don't see him getting much, especially if they don't have any wide receivers to throw to. They can just load up the box and go up against him. So I think it's a lot of unders. Go ahead.
Yeah. I don't think we picked the over-under or the spread on the game.
I will pick Broncos favored by 2.5. I've already bet that.
Okay.
I'll bet that, and then I'll bet the under.
Okay. I'm going to go under and New Orleans.
Very gutsy. Very gutsy. So
again, this is purely Spencer Rattler. Let's see what happens. And did you go over or under on Rattler's passing yards?
I went over.
You did go over. Okay.
So I just
we agreed on a lot of things here.
The thing I'm just worried about if Broncos defense gets like some touchdowns and that's the way they hit the over.
Yeah. Marvin Mims going to house a punt and it'll end like 7-6 or something.
So that's I think that discusses this game or lack thereof just pretty ugly. So
yeah,
I think that
I will say I picked New Orleans here. I think if you could bet Denver to win and New Orleans to cover, just like Broncos 1-point win, could totally see this being a disgusting game like that.
There you go, 9-8, something just disturbing. That's what it feels like. Just not a whole lot of offense, and it just like I said, I think I'll be more tuned into the baseball tonight. Personally, I think there'll probably be more offense over there, just to say. So it's probably a good week for Probably a good week for JJ to be gone, not to be talking about this game or lack thereof.
I'd agree.
So
what a time.
Going to wrap up here. Before we go, just let everybody know where they can find you and what you're up to.
You can find me at Jolo63 on the Twitterverse. I'm back to writing my Start Sit article, not for today, but next week. I just got back into town like midnight Wednesday morning. So did not write it for this week, but we'll be back. And yeah, then you can find us here next week. That's all I got.
So I'm at Jameson Rules. I'm starting to get that better. So got the DFS show with Joel Worth here on Sunday mornings at IDP Plus, and then here every Thursday on the Rod Pod. We'll have JJ back from assignment next week. And until then, we will see you guys then. So appreciate you guys tuning in. We will see you all next week.
Boat drinks.
Boat drinks. Peace out.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.